You are comfortably zoned with the Zigzag Man in Alameda, California, pushing on the doors of life marked pull and fighting the unholy trinity as we go. Big business, organized religion, and government. We are comfortably zoned in Alameda, California, kind of on the road today out of the 420 studios. I'm the Zigzag Man, Ralph Tyko, here at the Alameda Cremation Funeral and Cremation Service. Harry Greer's the man. He'll take care of you right to the end. Harry, I messed it up. Your wife's here. Her name is Valerie. It's not Veronica. No, she'll come back and talk to us for a little bit too. But a business that you've been in all your life, am I correct?
Yes, I grew up in the business. I was born in the Valley because my father was attending mortuary college in San Francisco, and my mother was living with my grandmother in Riverbank, California. My grandmother's a librarian, and the closest hospital was Escalon, so I grew up in the business.
Okay, was there ever a time that you didn't think about doing this as a... Did you have any other dreams or aspirations for an avocation, or was this going to be it?
I was in the military for 4 years. I was in Vietnam, and when I came back, I worked in electronics and didn't think a lot about going into the business with my dad. But in 1971, when I came home from my sister's high school graduation from Alameda High School, my dad said, "Would you like to come and work with me?" And I thought, well, I was living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I kind of liked Milwaukee. It was a fun town. I had to travel the state. When I went back to Milwaukee and I saw a snowflake in September, I said, maybe home's looking pretty good right about now.
Right.
So,
where were you in the service? Were you in the Air Force?
I was in the Air Force.
I was too.
Okay.
About that time, as a matter of fact.
I went in the Air Force in March of '65 and
wow. Got
out at the end of '68.
I went in November of '65, okay. So we were at Lackland Air Force Base, I'm sure.
I was at Lackland and then Shepherd, Wichita Falls. I was there for a year for school.
I went to the worst part of Texas. I went to Amarillo for my tech school.
Oh.
That was horrible. Wichita Falls was kind of nice, I'm guessing.
Tornado Alley.
Okay, other than a few tornadoes and the fact that you were in Texas in the first place. Yeah. Quite an adjustment, I'm sure.
Then I went from there to the Philippines.
All right. And what was your MOS? Or
I was teletype and crypto. Ah. So I did the maintenance on teletype machines and cryptographic equipment. Okay.
When you went to Vietnam, was it all the recruiters said it would be?
Sure.
Okay. When I went in, my recruiter said if you had to go to Vietnam eventually, which I didn't, I was stationed at Travis, that you'd be protected by the Army, and the Army would be protected by the Marines. So your little base, whatever you did, if you're skilled in the Air Force, would have all the grunts protecting you. But what he didn't tell us about were mortars, the possibility of being mortared, and Agent Orange, which wasn't known at that time, or if he knew about it, he didn't really tell us. So that those GIs that went to Vietnam, even if they were in the Air Force, they didn't come back the same in a lot of different ways. It was war. You were constantly terrified of being killed. How did you were what, 22, 20 years old, something like that?
I was 19, 20.
Yeah.
So I went in actually when I had my 19th birthday at Lackland. And so when I went overseas, and I was 20, 21.
Right.
And, a young guy, and I remember flying in, and we flew from the Philippines into a base, and we could see the fighters. It was like flying into a punch bowl with the ocean on one side and the hills on the other side, and I could see the fighters, and the tracers going in and the tracers coming out as we're landing on the runway. We were delivering a jet engine to a base, and then we flew from there to Tan Son Nhut and Saigon, and I spent my time basically in Saigon. I was at 3 different bases, but primarily Saigon. But we were based out of the Philippines, and we were in mobile communication. So if the Marines established a base, and the Seabees would come in and build the runway, then we were their first line of communications. Okay. So some of the guys that I was with were in some pretty tough situations. In fact, it's just become public knowledge that our organization was also in Laos and Cambodia, and one of the Air Force sergeants received, I guess it was a Medal of Honor for his service in, I guess it was Cambodia, or Laos, one of the two, I don't recall. But so what happened is the B-52s, if they're flying from Guam, they had to have the tracking to get them to the Ho Chi Minh Trail, get them up to North Vietnam. And so that's what the Air Force, part of our organization, was doing.
Right.
Is we would bring in the communications and so on for the trip to the north for the planes, and so they could get back home as well.
Well, kind of an offshoot, when I was stationed at Travis, I would, on my free time, drive out to the flight base, they'd bring in bodies.
Yes.
And I can't remember whether or not they were flag draped at that time or not. It just, or if that was done after they came back and were shipped to Oakland or wherever it was that they got their final preparations. But I do remember vividly that the body counts never matched what was reported in the paper. I mean, I'd go out there and I'd see maybe 75 bodies come in one day, and 120 the next, and 30 the next, and 200 the next. And for the week, they would count it as 18 bodies when they made the reports and stars and stripes or whatever. So it was horrible. It was a horrible situation.
Yeah, it was. It was a bad situation. I have a close friend, and he actually worked in Oakland. He was in the Army, and it was his job to prepare the bodies, to work on them, to get them dressed, make sure they were dressed properly, that they had their proper medals and ribbons and so on, and then escort them home to take them home. But you mentioned that you were at Travis and you saw the bodies coming in. When I was in Saigon, we had a barracks that we stayed in where we lived, and I would walk to one of the communication centers that I was responsible for the teletype and the crypto, and many times I would walk by the morgue, and I would see the GIs coming in they were all body bagged, and then they would take them into the morgue in Saigon and do the embalming, and then put them in the metal containers, and then you saw the containers when they arrived at Travis, and then they took them to Oakland. So it was a tough time in our country, and it's behind us, and you look like you made out all right. And
I got through it.
I got through it.
My major goal at Travis was not to go anywhere, was to stay at Travis, whatever it took, and I was fortunate enough to do it. Others weren't as fortunate, of course.
Right. I have close friends that...
Yeah, friends from junior high school that went in. The person that told me, a fellow named Kenny Kirsch from Jackson Heights. I was standing outside my apartment building with my notice to come down and take a physical, and I'm 19 and I'm shaking like a leaf, and I knew I wouldn't look good in khaki, and I knew I'm not a fighter, I'm a lover. I'm not even a lover. To be honest, I'm a liker a lot, but not a lover, and certainly not a fighter. And Kenny comes marching down the street, as it were, home on leave from basic training or tech school or whatever, and he had his little costume on, and it was blue, and it looked better than khaki. And he said, "Go see the recruiter in Flushing, New York, and he'll set you up, and it's better than anything else." And for me, it was. Some of my friends came in after me. One went to Vietnam. One stayed out here at Kelly Air Force Base.
Yes.
Not Kelly. Is Kelly in Marin?
Kelly's in Texas.
Kelly's in Texas. My friend was at Kelly. Another friend was at Kelly. Hamilton
was in Marin, yes.
And I'd be at Travis, and we'd go back and forth about 40 miles away and visit each other in our free time in lovely California. Others weren't as fortunate.
But I got to tell you one thing though. Then I know you want to move on, but
no.
I have a similar story, in that I got called in for my physical. Then I received my draft card, my new draft card, and it went from whatever it was, from college deferment, from 1Y or something
to 1A.
To 1A.
Right.
And so I was kind of like, I didn't see myself. I didn't see myself on a ship. And I didn't see myself really in the Marines or the Army, but so I called my uncle in Texas. My dad said, "Call your uncle in Texas. He spent 8 years in the Air Force. He still works for the Air Force at Kelly, ironically." And he said, "Go see your recruiter tomorrow." He says, "Don't wait till the next day." He says, "You don't want the letter saying greetings. We want you." And so I took his advice, and they offered me a deal and a year in tech school. So and looking back on it, probably it was the best thing, one of the best things I could have ever done in my life.
And just getting away at that age and being out on your own is priceless education.
Yes, you're absolutely correct.
The camaraderie with people that, of all different races, creeds, religions that you weren't used to socializing with, makes you grow up in a hurry and gives you a sense of yourself. I'm going to ask you this. You grew up, your dad was in mortuary, or I don't know,
Yeah.
What's the expression for your profession?
My dad was he was an embalmer, funeral director.
Okay. And it must have been almost business-like. Death must have almost been a business-like thing growing up. In that, not business per se, money exchanging hands. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about, well, it's every day. Mrs. Jones died, this one died. You're almost used to it. What was your first experience with death on a personal note, and how did that affect what you did for a lifetime work?
First of all, I've never gotten used to it. For me, it's been a difficult couple of weeks, and a very close friend of ours lost their 27-year-old son.
Cliff?
No, this was Tommy Phillips.
Oh, okay.
And my wife and I, we very close to his mother and father, and so we got up at 4 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, and we drove to Southern California to pick him up at the funeral home and bring him back to Alameda. And then just recently, another close friend of mine lost their 36-year-old son. And one thing my dad always told me, he says, when it gets to be just a business, it's time for you to get out. If you can't care about the people that you're sitting across from, no matter what their race is, no matter what their economic standard is, no matter what their religion is, if you don't have that compassion to help them, move on, because you're not doing anybody any service. For me, I guess the closest would be, it was an Easter. I don't remember the year, but I was at home and the phone rang, and I answered the phone, and it was my uncle on the phone, and he said, "Harry, can I talk to your dad? Or can I talk to your mom?" And I said, "Yes." And so I was still on the line, and then my mother's name is Frida, and he says, "Frida, Mom passed away last night." So that was my first...
Grandma.
My grandmother, yeah. And then I lost my other grandmother when she was 100, and that's been quite a few years ago. But then the closest was my sister, which was maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh,
and
so sorry.
She was a type 1 diabetic. In fact, she was diagnosed with diabetes when I was in tech school in the Air Force in Wichita Falls. And she passed away. And so that was you know, it hits. My parents are still alive. I mean,
so the business doesn't numb you to the experience of passing?
No, it doesn't numb me, but I have to, I have to maintain a certain amount of professionalism. I mean, I can't sit in here and fall apart with everybody who comes in here, otherwise I'm not serving them well at all.
And you're supposed to be strong to help those that are falling apart. And
they're counting on you. I mean, they and Valerie and I, we're extremely personal and passionate about this. I mean, these people are our friends. We've been in Alameda for so long that, when they lose somebody, I mean, we feel it. And
I can look at your expression and see that you're almost tearing up.
But it's, but you do have to kind of move yourself into a different space. Otherwise, you'll go nuts.
Right.
I mean, you'll go absolutely crazy. It's, and I've seen over the years so much tragedy. I mean, every day when I drive to work and I drive down Broadway, there's a house on Broadway, and I'll never forget it, because in that house, a mother and her daughter died because of smoke inhalation. And, it just sticks in my mind. I mean, I'm not obsessed about it, but I mean, I know when I drive by that's where they lived. And,
it's all about the survivors, obviously, yes, and making it easier for them to have memories that aren't tarnished by the final passing. With that in mind, what would you advise someone to do, because we're all going to go eventually, to make prearranged plans to make it easier on the survivors? What would you suggest for Johnny Lunchbucket or anybody out there who's just living life and has people around them that cares about them, religious services notwithstanding, none of that. I'm just talking about things to make it easier to get things in order before they go, even if they're not sick. I mean, because you never know. You can go in an accident, you can go suddenly. Anything you'd advise?
Pre-planning is obviously very important, and I think it's very important if you pre-plan that you let your family know that you're pre-planning, and let them know what you want, let them know what your wishes are, because all too often somebody passes away and the family doesn't know what to do. They don't know, did they want cremation? Did they want burial? Do they want a funeral? Do they not want a funeral? Do they want to be scattered at sea? I mean, they just don't know what to do, and they're at a total loss. And so when they come in, they're lost. They don't know what to do. And, we don't want to steer anybody in one particular direction. That's not what we're here for. We're here to help them get through. And we'll find out options. If they're thinking about burial, I'll call the cemeteries and get the prices for them, let them know what the prices are. But I think that's something that somebody should do in pre-planning. Let your family know what it is you want. The funeral expenses can be paid up front. I think AARP has advised people against doing that.
Why is it?
Well, I think they say that there's something about that the interest that the money earns, and they say you'd probably be better off to invest your money in something else, and then when the time comes, you've got the money available. Well, that's all fine and well.
If the money is there.
If the money's there. And,
right.
and I mean, I've seen people that were extremely wealthy at one time, and the next thing you know, they're on Medi-Cal, and they're having to spend down to $2,000 because they ended up with some catastrophic disease.
And doctor's fees and
hospital
fees.
They traveled around the world to try all these exotic treatments, and they didn't, they failed.
Right.
And when you talk about pre-planning, sometimes if I've ever been if I've neglected anything, and that is not appreciating until the last few years, the sense of urgency that somebody has when they've actually decided to pre-plan. I mean, I'm kind of like, well, they want to do the pre-need arrangement. Okay, I've got 3 funerals this week, and I've got to meet with a couple families, and so I just kind of maybe move it to the back burner. Well, those people, their sense of urgency is, for them, they face the fact that they're going to die. They know what they want done, and they want it down in writing, and many people want to pay for it so that it's done, it's over with. And what I've seen is once that's done, then they say, we don't even have to worry about it anymore. That burden's off of our shoulders.
Right.
We know where we're going. We know what's going to be done. Let's go live life and not worry about it.
Right.
But it's a very difficult situation. It's very difficult for people to truly believe that they're going to die. I mean, and we know that we all, like you said, we all know that we are. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when.
Of when. You want to keep it as straightforward with your family and survivors as you can, so they know what to do. Talk about, you were in business with your dad for a long time here in Alameda, and we're over here on Oak Street. They're on Blanding, and you guys kind of split. You went your separate ways. Can you get?
Okay. At one time in Alameda, there were 5 funeral homes, and it was
in little old Alameda.
There were 5 funeral homes at one time, and when I went to work for my dad, I went to work for him at a place in 1971 at a place called George Murphy Mortuary, which later became Murphy Greer.
So he didn't.
So he bought the George Murphy Mortuary, which was on High Street, which is now a school. And so right across from Lincoln Park. Well, my dad had 2 silent partners.
It's a big Catholic school. Is that the one?
No,
Philip Negre, I think.
No, it's right across from Lincoln Park. It's a
by the theater. By the theater.
Yeah, right next to the theater. Well, that used to be a funeral home, and my parents lived in there. There's an apartment in there that had 2 bedrooms, and it was it's a full apartment. And so my dad had 2 partners. And then there was another individual who had purchased a funeral home in Alameda from another guy, and he wanted to be part of us. And my dad said, he told the two partners, there were silent partners, he says, I don't trust this guy. He said, and it ended up where the guy, so my dad said, I don't want any part of him. And they decided to sell, so they had the majority. So they sold. So one minute we were at Murphy Greer Mortuary, and the next minute we were gone. We weren't in business. So my dad tried to get into a couple locations in Alameda, and it ended up the Blanding, Greer Family Mortuary on Blanding, was the property still owned by a dentist and his wife, or it was, Dr. Don Kubek. And so Don knew the plight that my dad was going through on trying to get a location in town, and he says, my tenants are leaving. You can turn it into a funeral home if you want. And he says, this is the rent, but I'm not responsible for anything. If the building falls down, that's your problem. And so with that, my dad went in and converted it all to a funeral home. So within a short period of time, the business we were busier, serving quite a few families. And so then I went back to work for my dad. Well, in December of 1988, my dad sold to Wilson and Kratzer Mortuaries of Richmond. And Mark Wilson was the owner, and I knew Mark, and I knew his general manager, Dennis Steiner. And Dennis and I were friends from JC days. I was in the Alameda JCs, he was in the San Leandro JCs. Well, Mark said, please stay, don't leave. He says, we really want you to stay. And so knowing his family and so on, I stayed. Well, then Mark subsequently sold the funeral home. He sold 10 funeral homes. Because in the meantime, Mark acquired Fowler Anderson Mortuary, which was on Santa Clara, across from the Elks Lodge, which was it's a Buddhist temple. So Smith Anderson sold to Mark, so now Mark owned the only 2 funeral homes in Alameda. Our current location, which was Smiley Gallagher Mortuary, and owned by John Pola, John sold it to the Church of the Nazarene. Then John went to work at Fowler Anderson, In the meantime, Hagee Keenan Mortuary had gone through some changes. They ended up being Chapel of the Chimes, and then they ended up it just closed up. Just closed it up. So now Alameda went from 5 to 2 funeral homes. Fowler Anderson and Greer family, both owned by Mark Wilson. Then Mark Wilson sold everything. His Richmond location, San Pablo, Martinez, Antioch, Grant Miller in Oakland. He sold all of them to Carriage Services of Houston, Texas. So Carriage is now, I think, the second largest corporate owner of funeral homes in the United States, behind Service Corporation International. So they came in and they said, we'd like for you to stay. And so they said, we want you to manage 3 mortuaries. We want you to manage Greer family, Fowler Anderson, and Grant Miller in Oakland. So I was running 3 funeral homes. I hit their numbers. I was a successful manager, but I have to clear one thing. My dad and I, it wasn't a split. He just sold, and then I stayed.
Oh, okay. So he's not there anymore.
No. My dad. We're in competition with our own name, and they're owned by a Houston-based corporation.
But you're not in competition with your dad.
No, not at all.
Oh, that's very good.
No. I talked.
I thought there was some sort of.
No.
Okay.
My dad's 94 years old.
Okay.
And I talk to him daily.
Yeah.
I talk to my mother and my dad every day.
Wonderful.
So,
that's very good news. I thought there was a family split.
No split.
So just the name, he had been out of it for a while.
Yeah, and so what happened with the name is, then it got to where, I was successful with them, and then it got to where I'm an Alameda guy. I'm not a corporate. Yes, I was able to do it, but it gets to where maybe your heart's not in it. You don't. I wasn't feeling good about myself. The prices are extremely high. The service fee just was very, very expensive. The casket and merchandise prices were just through the roof. I could not get over how they could charge so much money for this merchandise.
Right.
But they were doing it. They have to keep the analysts happy on Wall Street and their stockholders happy. Where the only thing I have to worry about is keeping myself and Valerie and our little dog Sophia happy. So that's...
With that in mind, because I fight the Unholy Trinity on my show, which is big business, government, and organized religion, funeral business is big business. What would you advise people look for who aren't as well prepared as we talked about being? And here's the family, all of a sudden, the shock, no plans made. What's the first thing that they'll rip you off on?
Well, I don't know. One time in Alameda there was only one funeral home. So the people just, I don't know.
I don't mean just in Alameda. I'm talking, this is worldwide.
By law, you have to, you have the general price list, and it has to be made out to the public. It has to be available to the public. This is a state of California rule. It's a Federal Trade Commission rule. So they'll give you, when you go to do an arrangement, you sit down, and they have to give you the general price list.
Will they play on something that, will they get your heartstrings going to, this is where he should be buried, or this is what he deserves, or, is there an emotional thing?
It can happen.
Okay.
I will not deny that it can happen. People will take advantage of people during a difficult situation. For me, with the corporation, the numbers were high, and when I was a manager, they expected me to hit the numbers.
And that means upgrading this, upgrading that, a higher cost casket, for instance, that maybe they wanted this. You bring, look at this one. This one is embedded with silk and all, whatever.
Well, that was never taught. The corporation didn't teach us, to upsell. I'm sure they were happy when somebody,
right.
You can make offerings.
Well, like I was in the insurance business. It's like throwing on waiver of premium.
Yeah.
You make the sale. Well, we have another little thing that'll boost the premiums up, get the commissions. It's good for you. You know, you should have it. Accidental death benefit, another little rider that they put up, which increases the profitability. So I know it's done in industry.
I mean, for me personally, it's not something that I would choose to participate in. I've had people tell me about their experiences, and they're not good.
Right.
I mean, I've had people come in, and I was appalled that somebody would, you know. Okay, let's say we're doing immediate cremation. Our price is $13.95. We're probably about $1,000 less than the people that have our name. When somebody comes in, we tell them it's $13.95. We tell them on the phone it's $13.95. That's all inclusive, as long as they don't die in their home. When we have to send 2 people to the home, we always do that. Or if there's morbid obesity, where they exceed a certain weight, where now we've got to deal with additional crematory fees and people. That includes the transfer of the body to the funeral home or to the crematory, the cremation fee, and then returning the cremated remains to the family. Okay, now this is where it can come in. If somebody wants to play words, for the minimum, the body is placed into what we call an alternative container. The casket's not required by law. Sure, they'll put their offerings out there. You'll see that they may show you a picture of the cardboard box and blah, blah, blah. Well, my wife and I, we don't refer to it as a cardboard box. It's an alternative container, but it is made of cardboard. We don't feel the need to... It could be demeaning to say you're going to put grandma in a cardboard box. I mean, that's reality. And so, you know, if they ask us what it's made of, if they want to see a picture of it, I mean, it's all right there. But we choose our words to not say cardboard box. We choose the words to say it's an alternative container. And
an urn, if you will.
An urn. I had a family come in the other day and they wanted an urn. And so I said, where's the cremated remains going to go? And she says, well, they're going to go to the punch bowl in Hawaii. And I said, okay. I said, if I recall, when I made your husband's arrangements, however many years ago it was, and sometimes I really remember the funerals. I mean, right down to minute details. And I said, okay, he went into a sheet bronze urn. That's all that's required. I mean, that meets the requirements. It's going behind a marble front or a granite front.
Right.
Nobody's going to see it. Why go spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on an urn that nobody's going to see it? Maybe if it's a glass front niche, you know, and you want something a little nicer. And then again, we try and keep our prices low to benefit the consumer. But back to your question, yes, people can be, people can be upsold.
Right.
And it's been my experience, and I saw it from my dad, is let's say you get the 85-year-old woman here, she's living on Social Security, and she wants the best for her husband. Well, okay, so she's got a little bit of money in savings. Maybe she owns her own home. So for her to get the best for her husband means that she's going to have to dip into her retirement
home
money.
Equity, maybe?
Yeah, home equity loan. And so I found myself, and I've seen it with my dad, many times we're trying to tell people, yes, we know you want to do the best, but you have to realize that, you know, you can get something nice, and that's what the best really is, and you don't have to throw all this money away.
You can get something you can afford reasonably without putting too much of a strain on the family budget.
Right. And so you find yourself, instead of upselling, you're trying to kind of bring them down to reality.
How often does religious beliefs come into play with this? Do they differ culture to culture, or are there people that react differently stereotypically around death? I mean, I'm Jewish, so I've seen funerals with some heavy-duty martyrs going like, the gall of that man to die and leave this poor woman type thing.
See, if you're Jewish, are you conservative, Reformed, or Orthodox? Probably.
I'm an agnostic, and my family, I come from a family of non-believers, and an immediate family of non-believers surrounded by folks who are who do believe, who are either conservative or Reformed, no Orthodox. And when my dad passed away, we would always joke about it. Well, surprise! How do you want to go? You know, what do you want to do? Do you want to be cremated? Surprise me was his thing. So when he died, he just happened to die at a time when the gravediggers were on strike, and cremation became basically the way to go. And my mother decided that was the way to go, and they were going to arrive to the services of a closed casket, and we're going to cremate him. And we got to the funeral home, and the casket is open, which was appalling because, we didn't want any of that. So I had to go over there and close the casket and look down. The guy looked nothing like my dad looked. And all of a sudden I have aunts, my father's aunts are going nuts because you can't be, Jewish people, you can't be cremated or this, that, and the other thing. And they wanted this, and they're screaming at my mother, who's going through this. Caused a rift in the family that lasted for years after that over the disposal of a man's. And the way we looked at it, he was flesh and bones at that time. He was, the soul left the body, if you will. He was no longer with us. So, have you seen that where families are at odds with each other about?
I've seen families fighting over the money before the body's been removed from the home. I mean, it's horrible. I mean, I've seen families split that never, ever, ever come back together. I had a family one time, they came in, and the father, their dad had died, and so their mother was with them, and it was two brothers. So they got into a fight. I don't know, a few years later, the mother dies, they come back in, and they still haven't talked to one another, and the whole time. And so I would say, okay, do you want the same as what we did for your dad? I'd have to ask one brother, and he would say yes. Ask the other brother, he'd say yes. They wouldn't talk to one another. They were going to do a funeral in the church, so they wanted a limousine. One limousine for one brother, one son, the other one for the other son. But we got to the bill, and the bill ended up being an odd amount. So it wasn't divisible by two.
Literally, it could have been $1.
We're talking, let's say it's 5 cents, and so somebody's going to have to write a check that's
3 cents,
for 3 cents, one's
2 cents.
For 2 cents, and neither one of them would budge. And so I finally just reached in my pocket and I put a penny on the table, and I said, okay. Right. But and then they left, and I said, this is sad. Why? But I
can assure you the split between the brothers came long before this, because I have a split with my brother, and it was long before either of them passed away.
But you mentioned cultures, how they get a little different. Okay, well, I'm Greek Orthodox. Okay, so cremation is out. I think in Greece they legalized cremation, but there aren't any crematories. So they have to go into, I guess it would be neighboring Turkey, or there's places where they can go. But
so where do you do we're right downtown Alameda, literally across from City Hall. Where do you do the cremation?
We do our cremations at Castro Valley Crematory.
Oh, okay. So it's not done here.
No.
Middle of the day, sometime you see a little smoke coming out. It's not grandma.
No.
All right, that's good.
And in fact, you're not supposed to see any smoke at all, because the Bay Area pollution control is I mean, you have to keep a chart that shows every time you do the cremation, which shows the temperature.
And if it's white smoke, they're going to come out and choose another pope, right? Okay.
No, we go to Castro Valley. I know the general manager. I worked with him for a while, and in fact, 2 of my former employees work there. And we still have a wonderful relationship.
So there's like a community of workers, of people in your biz that know each other. Do you have conventions? Are there new techniques coming in? Do you share stuff? Do you new catheters? Or is the biz open that way? Or
there's we belong to the California Funeral Directors Association.
Okay.
And they provide, different services.
You have a convention each year,
convention.
I'm sure.
Last year it was in San Francisco. This year it's in Southern California. Yes, and so when you go in there, they'll have caskets, they'll have urns, they'll have the transplant bank people are there, the curators' offices are there, and they're all giving out information, and everybody's telling you why you should buy their urn or buy their casket. And yeah, it's a trade show.
Limos and people,
and hearses, and the whole. It's all there.
Yeah.
But what you're finding is, because there's so much cremation in California, the cremation rate has increased so much that there are fewer and fewer funeral homes. So by there being less funeral homes, you're finding then there's a smaller number of members for these particular organizations. And so therefore, the conventions are small compared to what they used to be.
Is there gallow humor that goes on with the? I guess that's the only way I can explain it. Gallow humor. Is there a dark humor that pervades to get people through some of this? Because the business itself is kind of, you would say, for the worker in it, the person who does the embalming and what have you, somewhat dismal on some levels. Is there times where everybody just loosens up and has a few beers and
few too many maybe?
Okay.
No, you have to. I mean, if I couldn't laugh, with my friends, with my family,
right,
with my coworkers, what would you be? This can get very depressing.
Right.
If you let it get to you, this gets real depressing. Yeah, there's probably some humor that, humor in anything.
Yeah. But you do release it by laughter.
Yeah, we try.
That's good.
And if you're here with a family too, if they start laughing and doing this and doing that, hey, join in with them. Maintain your professionalism. Maintain your sense of objectivity. You know what you need to do, but laugh with them.
Right.
They need to know that. They need to know that you're human as well. And so, I just had a good friend. He lost his wife, and she was Jewish, and they did a service. But we laughed and joked. We've known each other for 45 years, and so we were laughing and joking about our times together and the fun we had, and with his wife.
Right. It takes his mind off of it a little bit, and
and we also, one thing that Valerie and I are, when we serve a family, we let them know that, hey, we're still here. Come in and have a cup of coffee with us. We like to meet you under non-stressful circumstances. We're your friend. We're here to,
right.
And that's so we really want the human aspect of this. But no, we laugh probably. Probably.
Harry, would you do it the same way? Would you go around the track the same way? You're in your mid-60s.
If I had anything to change, it probably would have. I should have done this before. When the corporation told me to leave, I felt a tremendous sense of relief. It was like this burden had just been lifted off my shoulders.
Right.
I mean, I no longer have to deal with that. I mean, they were casually just moving me down the line. I mean, I was the manager, and then it was like, I don't want to be the manager, and fine, we don't want you to be the manager. It was one of these things, and they offered me a non-compete agreement, and it never got done. It wouldn't have held any water anyway in California, right. But it didn't get done, and they thought it got done, but it didn't.
Right.
So
here you are.
Here I am.
Right.
Competition with my own name. But so what I did was when it happened, and that was October of 2008. And then in November, Valerie got laid off from her job. So now here we are, sitting at home in November of 2008, at the beginning of this incredible recession. We're saying, well, we still have a mortgage payment. But the smart thing that I did is that I put some money aside. I took, when they offered the retirement, and I appreciate their retirement plan in that, I mean, it was, but I was able to put money aside. I bought stock in their corporation for when their stock dropped to about $1. I bought a lot of stock, and then eventually I just got rid of it. I said, if I don't believe in the corporation, why own the corporate stock?
So that was able to finance this. And I might add, I haven't been in many of these places. This is very, very nice taste. Very well done, very subdued. Get the fish tank out there for the kids to watch.
The dog. Don't forget the dog.
Yes, the dog
Sophia.
makes it. A nice dog, too. Good-sized dog.
Yeah.
You seem to... And you make your own decisions. You answer to nobody. There's no corporate... You don't have to pick up the phone and say, may I, mother, may I, type thing. You and Valerie make your own decisions.
It feels good.
Right.
But, I took...
And Veronica never gets involved.
No.
which is a nice thing.
But see, I have a very close friend of mine, because I'm also a licensed embalmer, licensed funeral director. I have an insurance license because we fund a lot of funeral plans with insurance. There's also trust and so on. But I've got a good friend that I went to mortuary college with, and he owns Santos Robinson Mortuary in San Leandro. So when I was shown the door, and they didn't even do it in Alameda, they took me to Oakland to do it, but anyway, it's neither here nor there. Well, it's kind of
right.
fun.
We've all had our moments where we've been shown the door by someone.
Yeah.
So, and she's usually a lot prettier than a funeral director in my thing.
But so I felt it coming, so it's not like it was a real surprise. But
there were lovely parting gifts too. There were bucks involved for you.
No, they gave me my check and my vacation pay. There was no 2 weeks separation pay or anything.
Oh.
This is what you've earned up to this point in time, and this is your vacation pay up to this point in time.
Oh, okay.
There was no golden parachute here. It was
So this brings up change. How do people adjust to change in life? Because there's always going to be something, a bump in the road, highs and lows. What did you do? I mean, you had to pull up your bootstraps a little bit mentally. What did you do to say, Mom, I've got some adjusting to make? Did you go on vacation and just...
Well, we go on vacation. We went to Palm Desert for a week. We have a timeshare, and so we were able to trade our timeshare, and so we went down there for a week. But what happened is Ralph, we kept getting calls. Now, we weren't advertising anywhere, but people would find me, and they would call me. The first guy to call me after we were gone, and I talked to my friends in San Leandro, and says, okay, if you get a family, we'll assist them, and we'll work out the money, and so...
Right, so you could almost be independent.
But I mean, the first guy to call me was a friend of mine, and it was for his mother, and he's an attorney in town. It's like I didn't know what to do. I mean, it's like, now what? Normally if they call, I get on the phone, I call the mortuary and say, okay, can we get somebody to, or I make the phone call. Anyway, so we took care of that, and we made the arrangements in his home. And so it was like I was it's like I didn't know how to walk, if you know what I'm saying.
Right.
But we continued to stay busy. And we were doing 1989, I think we did about 45, 50 services. Now that's a lot of services. So, but everybody, there was one common thing, Ralph, that always came out, and that was, Harry, you need to get an office in town. And so in 2012, we were able to, in July of 2012, we were licensed in this place.
And this was the Nazarene Church.
It was the Nazarene
had been
Church.
Sold, as you said, to by a funeral home.
Yeah, the funeral home sold it to the Nazarene Church,
Right.
and then now we're leasing it from the church, and we've turned it back into a funeral home. And
Right.
and I'll tell you what's incredible is people walk through the door, and they go, you know something, Harry? My mother and father were both buried through this mortuary. And I mean, I'm saying that's a long time ago. Yeah, well, it was in the '60s or something. But you know, and you know, and I appreciate your kind words about we don't want this facility to be. We want it to be, when you walk in the door, you feel welcome and you feel good about walking in the door. We don't have the biggest chapel in the world, so the majority of the times the place is full.
Now, this, off the wall, I go to the just to hang. There's a beautiful cemetery up in the hills of Montclair in Oakland.
Okay.
And I wonder, it's paid for as they go. When it gets full and there's no new business coming in years from now, because there's no place to bury anybody, who pays the upkeep? In other words, if I buried Grandma there last year, and they no more new money coming in the year 2050, what keeps that cemetery pristine? What pays for the lawnmowers? What pays to keep it up after there's no more cash flow? In other words, I'm sure they're working on future, with the idea there's going to be, fill this place up, future business. I was just curious about that.
When somebody buys a cemetery plot,
Right.
The state,
You're looking for perpetual.
the state of California requires that a certain amount of money go into a perpetual care fund, an endowment care fund or something. So that money is put aside so that if the cemetery no longer has any new revenue, then that fund will take care of the upkeep of the cemetery. So money has to be kept into a fund and kept separate from the operating fund, and it can't be used for anything but the endowment care after there's no more new money coming into the cemetery.
So by law, it's set aside
by law.
that everything will be cool and.
Yeah. So that's why
Okay.
sometimes you'll come to a cemetery and it'll say an endowment care cemetery. Now, there are some situations with some of these little country cemeteries where there never was a fund. And that creates a problem, because if nobody's there to take care of them, then they just...
Right, but is this law a California law?
It's California law.
Okay, so other states have other laws?
Yeah.
You don't know
now,
what's going to happen.
I don't know that the law applies to religious cemeteries. I know that the Catholic diocese, they're also in the mortuary business, but I don't know if that applies to them or not. And in Alameda, there's two churches that I'm aware of that have niches. Christ Episcopal Church on Grand and Santa Clara, and then the First Presbyterian Church, which is also on Santa Clara. So they have niches actually within the church grounds.
Two beautiful buildings, I might add.
Yes.
Right? One across the street from another.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not a churchgoer, but any town you go into, the most beautiful, ornate buildings are always the churches.
Always the churches, yeah.
And Alameda has a lot of beautiful architecture, none prettier than the churches. So a lot of wealth hung up in those buildings.
Yes.
And I always say, socially, if every organized religion liquidated, or if not liquidated, that's at least pay taxes for social programs. this it would be nice, but that's off the topic. Anything you want to put into the recorder for posterity that anybody you want to thank for your life? You know, you want to talk about your dad a little bit? And
yeah, my dad. Like I say, he
the way he handled things obviously was an influence.
My dad's interest. It's an interesting family history because my grandparents moved from Iowa to Eastern Washington, and then they homesteaded into Canada. So my dad was born in Canada when his family was homesteading, and then they went back to Washington. In World War II, he ended up down here, and then, like I said, he was in Mortuary College in San Francisco. So I've been around the business all my life. He formed a funeral home in San Bruno at one time, built it from the ground up. That didn't quite work out. And so there was a lot of times we didn't see my dad, you know, because he's always working. I mean, that's the nature of the business many times. But, you know, then when I went to work for him, it was a stressful time. I mean, all of a sudden, your best buddy, your dad, is now your boss, and he has some pretty high expectations with regards to the business. I mean, he's got a way that, you know, this is the way this business is going to be run, and this is the way it's going to be, and that's it.
Right, so he taught you discipline and...
Well, the Air Force taught me some discipline.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you learned it, because I certainly didn't get any out of the Air Force.
Well, I can say I learned it.
Right.
But, you know, I mean, I admire what he went through. You know, I mean, having 2 funeral homes and losing them both, and then coming back to do another one. I mean, I'm sad he sold it. He's sad he sold it. He tells me every day he wished he would have never sold it. He said he said, if I made a mistake in life, that's the biggest mistake I ever made, is when I sold the mortuary. But he said, you know,
what does he do recreationally, and what do you do recreationally to get away from it?
Well, my dad, in his earlier days, he was actually a weightlifter and did bodybuilding.
Really?
And
was he involved with any of the downtown gyms that are famous for Jack LaLanne was supposed to be here?
He knew Jack LaLanne. He knew a lot of the, a lot of the guys.
Right.
And then sometimes, I mean, he would go to weightlifting meets, and I would go with him. You know, and we would watch, and you got to. I mean, he liked that. One thing that my dad did that was real important to Alameda is every year he would drive to the valley and he would pick up fruit in his truck. My dad had this pickup truck. And so he got to know some farmers, and they had fruit. They called them culls. So it's not pristine. There's nothing wrong with it. It maybe had a blemish on the...
Right. Safeway might...
Safeway wouldn't want it because it doesn't look perfect. And so they would give it to my dad. And so, I mean, he would make, 4, 5, 6 trips a summer and just come back with these crates, these boxes just filled with all this fruit. And then we would put it in bags. And then he would take it around, and he knew.
Okay, continuation of the interview with Harry. We got the batteries all working, and in closing, Harry wants to talk about hospice a little bit and the importance thereof.
It's been my experience over the years that to see people, they pass away in institutions, hospitals, and so on. I can remember as a younger person working in the business, of course, at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's raining outside and it's cold, the last thing you want to do is have to go get in the car and then go to somebody's home and pick them up and bring them into your care. So, but as I've gotten older and I see people dying in institutions, and over the years I said, well, it's too bad they can't die in the comfort of their own home. And so I know that hospice at one time, there was really a negative. Anybody mentioned hospice, it seemed like it was negative. But
because they're giving up? Is that the idea? Is it because it's negative because you don't want to stop that fight for life?
I don't know what it was. There was just something negative about the word hospice, but I have really grown to appreciate what they do. They're marvelous people. I mean, they're coming in, they're giving comfort to the person that's sick, but they're also giving a tremendous amount of comfort to the people, to the families. And they're wonderful people. I mean, people say, well, Harry, how do you do what you do day in and day out? And I say, how do hospice people do what they do day in and day out? I mean, they're there, I mean, right on the front line, and I mean, and the people pass away, but they are so compassionate, and I admire them for the work that they do. And it's nice to, if I go into somebody's home that's passed away, to see that the hospice has been there, the family, although they may be upset, but they received the proper counseling, the proper treatment, and that's how I feel about hospice.
Terrific. Now, for just a second, because before the battery went dead, we got started on the old Oakland Raiders, San Francisco. Your dad was a big sports fan, and this show was a lot of sports. So, tell me your earliest memory. Are you into baseball at all?
Oh yeah, baseball. In fact, I'm going to spring training.
Are you with
on
the
the
A's?
20th?
With the A's?
I went to all the World Series games in the '70s and went to all of them.
I went to the sixth game of the Mets World Series, and I knew they would lose the seventh when they lost that game. I was inconsolable. I was such a fanatical Met fan in those times. And if you'll remember, in the sixth game of that series, Jack Benny threw out the ball for Charlie Finley to start the game.
Yeah.
He was sitting in the box, and it's the only World Series game I ever went to. What was your first baseball experience? Your first game you ever went to as a kid, and who played?
The first game I ever went to as a kid for some sort of professional baseball.
Right.
Now, I don't know who they played, but it was the Oakland Oaks when they played in Emeryville.
Right. This is before the Giants moved out here.
Yes.
The old Pacific Coast League.
Yeah, the Pacific Coast League, and it was the Oakland Oaks. I can remember watching the games on TV. You had the Seattle Rainiers, you had the Oaks, you had the San Francisco Seals, and
this is back in the days if a player could make more money playing in the Pacific Coast League than getting called up to the majors sometimes.
Now, did you ever hear of the House of David?
I did, with the bearded baseball players.
Yeah, and they would travel the country. Yeah,
right.
And so I saw them play as well.
All right.
And I mean, back then, the House of David, the PCL. I'd go visit my grandmother in Washington, and Lewiston, Idaho had a team, and I don't know. I think they
were called town teams.
Yes, and and it was pretty neat to go sit in a little ballpark and watch the team, and that was. But I also had one experience in baseball, because I went to the first game I ever played at Candlestick. One of my closest friends that I grew up with, his dad was one of the engineers that designed the stadium. So he got us seats, and we sat behind Vice President Nixon, Mayor George Christopher, and Governor Brown.
Wow.
So, and I was a little kid, and here I am, and I walked up. And I actually shook hands with the Vice President of the United States. There wasn't all the security stuff, and I know that President Nixon got in trouble later on. But for me, it was a thrill to see the Vice President of the United States.
Sure.
So I shook hands with him, and he says, "Hey, kid, would you like this ice cream cup? Remember the ice cream cups, and you had the little wooden paddle spoon with it, the carnation?"
Sure.
So he gave me that ice cream. And so my grandmother was here visiting from Washington, and she was a big, Harry Truman, Roosevelt,
Democrat.
Big time. And so I went walking into the house, and here's this little kid, and he's so happy, beaming, just met the Vice President of the United States, shook his hand. I told my grandmother, and she said, "Have you washed your hand yet?" So
I was going to ask you that if you washed your hands. Not after the funeral, that would be, but after Nixon, you got.
Yeah.
That's a great line.
Yeah. She asked me if I washed my hand. My mother said that my face just sunk to the floor because I couldn't,
Right.
But no, and then I went to. We had a coach for. I guess I was in grammar school. And he would take us in his car, and he would just load the car up with kids, and you hoped you didn't get the short straw because then you'd have to ride in the trunk. And so we would go to watch the Giants play at the old Seal Stadium in San Francisco.
Right, and that game you saw with Vice President Nixon, the first game of Candlestick. Gino Smoley of the Dodgers led off that game. I remember that, but they had moved the previous year from New York. I was a New York Giant fan. I was 11 years old and my team was taken away. So your joy was not felt by me in those days.
No, and I went through it when the Raiders went to L.A.
Oh, that must have been horrible.
Yeah, and my dad, he had 6 seats to the Raiders, and he's gone. I have season tickets now, and I've taken my dad to a couple games.
Right.
And they.
Well, do you remember the Heidi game at all?
Well, I was at the Heidi game. I mean, you were talking about Ben Davidson slamming Joe Namath, and we were at the Heidi game.
Okay.
And
I was home on leave, watching it on TV. They cut it off, and I went into the bedroom to listen on the radio.
Yeah.
Jets were ahead. They were going to win, and they ended up not winning. And I came out and told my family, no, they didn't win. It was a big party. They didn't win. Tell me about your experience at the Heidi game. Remember Charlie Smith running that back?
Yeah, it was.
Charlie Smith is a buddy of mine over at the 24-Hour Fitness, and he and his wife Judy are over there. He's just a great guy. He's the guy that ran it back.
It was you couldn't believe it. I mean, it was, that's how it was. It was just so unbelievable. But I also was the Sea of Hands. I was at that game.
Right.
I went to Super Bowl II. When the Raiders played Green Bay, I was stationed at McCoy Air Force Base in Orlando, Florida.
It was called the Super Bowl then.
I don't know what we called it then, but I still have the program and the ticket from the game. And you asked me about baseball and this and that when we were off.
I think football is more of your passion than.
Oh, I've got the old cards. I mean, I have my complete sets that I had when I was a kid, and when I went into the military, my mother didn't throw them away.
Wow.
So I've got baseball cards, complete sets into the 1955.
Topps baseball cards.
Topps.
You asked me off air, how about you? What do you do? And from 1983 to 1995, every summer I would go around the California League and the Northwest League here on the West Coast and sign players to their contracts with Topps to obligate them and obligate Topps to use their picture on baseball cards, give permission when they reach the majors. So I got to meet a lot of those players whose cards you collected as a kid, and I collected as a kid. I got to meet them as coaches and managers and the minors, and got to meet a whole bunch of people, Ken Griffey, and sign them to their contracts, and Will Clark. So interesting that baseball cards are, and you still have yours from you.
I still have them, and then I at one point in time I was buying a lot of cards, and I bought a lot of complete sets that are still wrapped in their cellophane, so they've never even been, the boxes haven't been opened. I have some cases of cards that have never been opened, never been touched, and
So that's how you learn math.
Yeah.
You learn run average,
slugging percentages,
right, as a kid.
That's how you learn it, yeah.
Good.
Average yard per,
Do you have a favorite player from when you were a kid? It doesn't have to be a superstar, but somebody that you admired?
Well, when I was a kid, one of my Willie Mays was just the. I mean, he was to this day, and Frank Robinson,
Yes.
Roberto Clemente. These were guys.
Yeah.
And then there were a lot of regular players as well. But I mean, you mentioned that you were heartbroken when the Giants left New York.
I was devastated. I remember. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't root for the Yankees. We had 3 teams, and suddenly we have one. And I was a National League guy, and I'd follow them. They had recreations. Les Kiter did recreations with the teletype machine, and he'd smack something in the studio and go, well, there's a bang, it's off the wall. There goes Willie coming around third. It's 11:30 at night. I'm 12 o'clock. I have the radio under my bed, under my pillow, and
the old transistor radio.
The old transistor. My family would. My mother and father come in, find the transistor radio. They didn't know I had a little kit, a radio kit that you'd put together that would barely get the signal, but I'd be up all night listening to games and stuff. It's just wonderful being a sports fan.
See, I was a Dodger fan, and so then when the Dodgers went to LA and the Giants came to San Francisco, and I had a difficult time with
whom to choose, right?
Yeah, and then when the A's came just as I was, when I got out of the Air Force, the A's were here.
Oh, okay.
But and you mentioned some of the crazy things of the ballparks. Do you remember that Oakland, they didn't have the ball boys or the ball girls bringing out the balls? They had that rabbit.
Right. Charlie's rabbit.
Charlie's rabbit would come up way back behind home plate and have all the baseballs there, and then the umpire would take the balls.
Charlie was an innovative person.
White shoes,
the colored uniforms.
Yeah.
He wanted to have an orange ball for a while. And he literally built those great teams that we talked about in the 70s from scratch. I mean, he had, because Kansas City, when he bought the team, was floundering. They were basically a farm team of the Yankees. They got Arnold Johnson, who owned them.
Yes, I remember those days.
And he had a great deal with the Yankees. Anybody who came up that was great, trade him to the Yankees. Bud Daly was a great pitcher. Give him the Yankees. And we hated the Yankee corporate image living back there. And Charlie gave Catfish his nickname, Catfish Hunter. He had Blue Moon Odom.
Yeah.
He had all these things. And he built a team based on charismatic guys. Campy Campaneris, who's their shortstop back in Kansas City. When they came out here, they were ready. They were for those great teams to come. They came out here in '68. By the early '70s, they were just dynamite.
Yeah.
And but he wasn't very popular with his players.
No, and he when he dismantled the team at the end, it was just to see everybody go. But he put a winning team on the field
for a lot of years.
Yeah,
and then there was Billy Ball later on.
Yeah.
With Billy Martin coming out here with a lot of excitement. Baseball's a great game.
It is.
As is football. Give me a favorite baseball memory of anything. We know Willie's your man. Willie's my man too growing up. But
that's so hard to... When Whitey Ford pitched that perfect game, wasn't it Whitey Ford? Or no, in the World Series, it wasn't Whitey Ford.
Oh, Don Lawson.
Don Lawson. Yeah, that was, and wasn't it Yogi Berra that came out and jumped on
Right, jumped in his arms and whatnot.
But I wasn't a Yankee fan. I can't
It's
bring
an exciting moment for you.
It was an exciting moment. To see people like Willie McCovey come into the game.
Right.
Just so many exciting moments. It's just hard to say what was the most exciting. Maybe the winning of the first World Series when Joe Rudy ran and made that catch.
Yes, against Cincinnati.
When Campaneris threw the bat in Detroit, or it was in Oakland, but
playoffs,
against Detroit.
Yes.
I mean,
and he just wielded that bat. He twirled it around and flipped it out to the pitcher or at the pitcher with a lot of dexterity.
No, that was exciting. I mean, it wasn't just to see all this stuff. I went to a game at the LA Coliseum when the Dodgers, and I don't know if it was in, I think maybe it was for Roy Campanella.
When they lit the kid,
absolutely,
there was 70 some odd thousand people.
Yeah, I was
they all
at the
stood
game.
up and everybody lit a match for Campy.
Yeah.
And wow, I
that was
with that.
Now that guy, he was. I mean, there were a lot of guys with the Dodgers.
Right.
And then there was one of the guys with the Dodgers.
Wally Moon.
The moon shots over the
shots at Coliseum.
Yeah, that short left field wall.
Right.
And he was a left-handed hitter, if I recall.
I don't recall.
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't recall if he was a lefty or righty, but I remember he was famous for hitting home runs over that high fly balls to get over that big fence that they set up.
My mother used to take me and a friend, and she'd take us to Candlestick and drop us off. This is before it was ever enclosed. So I mean, and if I recall, we got to sit in the bleachers. I think it was 90 cents. And so she'd drop us off. We'd have to be there for batting practice and the whole bit. As soon as we could get in, I mean, we got in. And every now and then we'd get a doubleheader. And then we'd take public transportation home. And it was, I mean, you think about those things growing up as a kid. You went to the game, and you went, and you had fun. And
and you had to navigate your way home as a little kid.
Catch the bus, the streetcar and so on, and and get back home, and those were pleasant memories. And then with football, I saw R.C. Owens in the original Alley-Oop.
Yes.
White Tittle, Hugh McElhaney, Joe Perry. I mean, Leo Nomalini. The guys.
Just great 49 years.
Raymond Chester was my next door neighbor for a while.
Really?
Yeah.
Doesn't he? I think he runs the club, the golf club out there.
Not anymore. But he did the Chabot Golf Course.
See, I'm old enough or my memories were both about the same age. I remember when Raymond Chester, I think he played with the Colts.
Yeah, that would have been when he was with the Raiders, if I recall. He was Rookie of the Year, and then I think he did end up at the Colts.
Right.
Yeah.
Just great years, and this is such a community of folks that when these people lived in the neighborhoods, they were neighbors. It wasn't when I lived in Danville, I used to walk to the post office. I told you about Big Ben's bar across from where I used to walk, and there was Raleigh Fingers and Joe Rudy, and they were making wages. They weren't millionaires coming up. They were just living in the community, underpaid by Finley, and making good wages, but not great wages, and which allowed them to be human with the folks around them. They weren't in gated communities. They didn't have agents, and you get to interact with them in a way that you don't see with the athletes today that in the community. Well,
I remember that they all had jobs in the off season, and that's where they made their living. Was quite a few of them were into insurance, and that's these guys.
One of the part-time jobs that players had, I remember from my baseball card, was a fellow named Richie Hebner. Do you remember?
I remember
what he did.
No, I don't.
He was a grave digger.
Okay.
In the off season. So that's a good way to end the interview, don't you know?
Yes.
I'm going to close it out by, you've never heard my closing. I implore people at the end of each show to keep their humor dry, their dreams wet, their kids off the laps of clerics that wear dresses, and keep the kids, if you have it, that's a good thing. If you keep that third thing in mind, it's very important for the whole family. And that's one thing you never hear a Jew say. You never hear a Jew say is, "Here, Mrs. Wang, you take the keys to the car, you drive my kid over to Father O'Brien and leave my kid there for the whole day and let them frolic together. You don't hear Jews say that. So keep that, and keep your kids out of recruiting stations. Military recruiting stations are bad. You will take your kid over there in one form or another, and they will return your child in a different way. Even if the child doesn't face combat, child is a part of the military complex that they need to kill people to stay alive, and it's a bad mindset. War is bad. Letting your child be fodder for economical wars, economical drafts such as we have, to go over in imperialistic ways and take a chunk out of somebody's country is bad. We need to develop alternative fuels, so we're not oil dependent.